So here we are in our today's version of the Winter of Discontent, not dissimilar to the one in 1979, when the then Prime Minister, Sonny Jim Callaghan, returned from a foreign jolly to famously inquire, all together now, crisis, what crisis? Is Rishi Sunak's maths speech today his crisis, what crisis moment, do you think?
He never said those words, but how the Sun presented them. I remember it as well. Look,
That's what he became now.
Yeah, the maths Rishi Sunak needs to think about. 130,000 unfilled vacancies in the NHS, 7.1 million people on the waiting list in England alone, all the missed targets. Michael Gove, who was Education Secretary in 2011, said everybody, or the majority of people, should learn maths to 18. Look, if you can't count, you can't read, you can't write, you need those basic lessons all the way through because it's a fundamental skill. But for Sunak to go down this route now... Well,
let's ask Ed.
It's ridiculous.
He's asking for a smack in the chops, isn't he, making this speech today? I mean, politically speaking...
I was thinking this morning, literally everyone on this panel, except for me, has eaten 3 Weetabix this morning because you're all on fire. Now I'm going to get beaten up, although it is the right policy. I mean, it is a good idea to study maths.
Is today the day, though?
Study maths till 18, but unfortunately the Prime Minister hired James Forsyth as his political communications head and not Susanna Reid. And he should be listening to Susanna Reid because, as she was saying before we went on air, in terms of what the public are thinking about when they get up this morning, it's about the NHS and it's about the railways, and they're not thinking about maths A-level. No. And considering my son's reaction when Rishi was running for leadership, it's probably going to cost him more votes, even though it's the right policy.
Well, the trouble is...
So I think you are right. Crisis management, crisis what crisis, showing you've got a grip and showing you're on top of it is political 101.
He has a reputation for not being visible, being low-key, not being in touch with what real people are experiencing, and being a bit nerdy. And unfortunately, this policy, this idea that today of all days, the beginning of the year, the NHS is in crisis, you do not want to be in the position where you're having to call 999.
Well, I think
and if you do, you don't want to be left outside.
I think you are right to...
A&E.
You're right to call it out. So let me just unpack that very quickly. I think it is the right policy. He talked about it when he was running for leadership. I think maths is incredibly important. Speaking as somebody who's not very good at maths, wish I was better.
Maths is important, but why
let me just
18?
say, no, I'm going to agree with you, which is that the customer is always right. And, you know, what you're saying, I think, is a flag to Downing Street about a potential problem for Rishi Sunak, which is how he is defined. Remember, he became Prime Minister, really, although he'd been Chancellor, he wasn't particularly well-known. And just as, you know, I always say, you know, an opposition leader can be very quickly defined in a few weeks, Rishi is in danger of being defined exactly as you've presented him, as the guy who's kind of off on a tangent on a particular hobby horse when the rest of the country is looking at this. So that is a communications problem.
You speak as a Tory.
Well, I speak as somebody who supports this government and wants it to do well and wants it to get its message across. And as Susanna pointed out, on the same paper that's got the maths on the front, it's or near the top, in the Mail, Rishi handling the NHS is like page 7. And it should be page 1.
Sunak's due to pop up later this afternoon, to speak to a grateful nation and take a couple of questions. He's going to talk about his maths. But if he's going to talk about his maths, again, 65% of kids are leaving school at 16 without the required standards in maths, reading and
well, the maths
writing.
is now the most popular A-level.
But that's 65% leave with it, so that's 35% more than 1 in 3 kids don't get it. That's after 13 years of the Tories in power. So in a way, he's saying, let's do this. Well, you've not fixed it for 13 years.
He's going to get carved up at this press conference, isn't he? I mean, he's going to make a speech about maths, and the first question is going to be about the NHS.